Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties Radio, Season 6, Episode 2. My name is Lee, I am in WA, and I'm joined, of course, by Vikas in Canberra.
Hey, how's it going?
This week we're going to be talking about, three topics-ish. We're going to be talking about the Neil Prakash ongoing affair. The Australian government is attempting to strip him of his Australian citizenship. He is, they claim, I guess, he's not been gone through a court or anything, though they claim that he is a terrorist for ISIS, and they're trying to revoke his citizenship on that basis. And we're also going to talk about the ongoing sort of stuff about the grievance study hoax, and also Shepherd.
No. Don't forget about Lindsay Shepherd. Let's talk about what's the name of that Saudi girl?
Oh yeah.
Saudi girl.
Yep.
That
Yep.
just
Okay.
got her thing, Yep.
Yep. Okay. So we'll be talking about that. So let's start with Neil Prakash. So essentially, he's a. I mean, to be generous, you could say that he's an organizer, but he's involved with ISIS. I don't think there's any real dispute in that. The underpowers.
Let's not sugarcoat it. He's a terrorist.
Yeah, I mean, like I think in these things, it's always best to. How do I put it? I mean, I think there's this. What is his name? Zakari. Basically, the guy that Obama killed with a drone strike, where he was just a preacher. I mean, does that make him a terrorist? I don't know. But anyway, this guy, he's over fighting for ISIS or contributing to the ISIS. And under laws that we've discussed previously, where the Australian government is attempting to revoke his citizenship, the issue is he a Fijian national? Because essentially you can't take away somebody's citizenship if that's the only citizenship they had. Like it's, I mean, I guess theoretically they could. It's international law, and people can always ignore international law. But it's against international law to strip people and make them stateless.
Well, it depends. If you're a signatory to the UN rights, UN whatever, human rights.
Yeah,
Sorry,
which is
UN,
Australia
human
and
rights.
basically most countries.
Most countries, except
but of course, the
not
UN,
China, not India, not
Yeah.
Pakistan, not Bangladesh,
Yeah.
not any of those Southeast Asian countries, not Singapore. So
Yeah.
all of these countries that basically on the way to Australia are not signatories.
Sure.
The Convention on Refugees, I believe it's called.
Yep.
But all of that aside, so I remember Ziv saying that, because Ziv was in the conversation on this last
Yeah.
time, when he wasn't here. He isn't here this time. Is that he said, so the way that he envisioned the law is that it would become a race to see who could get rid of his citizenship first.
Yeah.
And then the country left standing would effectively be the one
Carrying the bag.
carrying the terrorists.
Yep.
And it looks like, so here's the thing, the way it's been reported in the media and the way it's kind of played out. So obviously being in Canberra, I talk to people, at various departments and stuff like that. And, you learn a thing or two from people working in these departments about kind of what is going on. And to be perfectly honest, I would have sided with the media reporting, going, how could you get it so wrong? Like, you didn't speak to them, you didn't speak to the Fijian government and all of this other stuff. You didn't clarify that, you just went straight to get rid of it, get rid of the citizenship. And it's because of what Zeev actually told us. It was actually a race to see who could get rid of the citizenship the fastest.
Yep.
And Fiji won in this case.
Yes. So it's very much, this is almost like a Section 44 shenanigans thing, where it's like, does the citizenship of his father, who's Fijian, pass down kind of automatically to him and Fiji?
So the answer is yes, it does.
Yep.
But because Fiji had changed their law at some stage, I think in the last 10 years or something, it's not. So all Commonwealth countries, all former British Empire nations have birthright citizenship.
Yep.
Every last one of them, right? So if you have a father, right, or a mother that belongs to one of these former imperial nations, you actually have citizenship in that other country. Right? You automatically have it. So this is something you need to go and check up. Now, countries like Fiji recognize this as a bit of a problem, and they've changed the law sort of retrospectively. But they've done it. But they've kind of done it. And so
it's interesting. So a member of the bureaucracy, the immigration bureaucracy in Fiji, said that Neil Prakash has never held or sought Fijian citizenship. So,
Yeah, so that was the change
Yeah.
they made. You have to actually seek it.
but never held.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's never held it.
Yeah. But it's just like it's just like Barnaby Joyce never held. He never applied to become a New Zealand citizenship just because his.
But he
dad
was in New
wasn't-
Zealand. But he did hold citizenship. That's why he was.
He did because
Yeah.
his dad was a New Zealander. But what you don't understand is the way that all these British Empire countries worked back in the day was if your dad was a citizen of that country, you were automatically given citizenship to that country.
Okay.
Right? And that's what stung Barnaby Joyce. Barnaby Joyce never went to New Zealand. He wasn't born there.
Yep.
Right? But his father was a New Zealander because New Zealand hasn't changed their law to you have to seek it. Right? He got he got New Zealand citizenship. Now people with British parents are in the same boat. Right?
That's me.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
what I found
exactly.
out in this whole Section 44 thing that because my dad was born in England, I have a British citizen.
Exactly. Now, Fiji changed the law so that you had to actually seek it.
Okay.
Right? So, which is smart. I think the way that's how it should be. I think citizenship should be an opt-in thing. But, some countries don't work that way.
Well,
So-
also, I mean, there's like, there's a legacy element, a lot of these immigration laws, they've been around for a long time, and I think with Matt Canavan and his Italian citizenship, sometimes it can be a bit arcane. I mean, it turned out that he wasn't a citizen, but like the complexities of the system made it difficult to be like, oh yes, clearly yes you are, or yes you're not.
Exactly. Because you're dealing with whoever else's laws are in question.
Yeah.
Right? So keeping all that in mind, the Australian government did obtain, to be quite honest, I don't think it was bad legal advice. To be perfectly honest, I sit there and go like, Zeev was 100% right. It was a race at that point between Australia and Fiji to get rid of the citizenship as fast as they could, because the one left standing would be the one left standing. The one who didn't do it would be the one left with the citizenship. And because Fiji had been smart enough, who knows how many years back, to change it to seek it, they had that bureaucratic sort of, well, we don't have to do it because we never gave it to them.
Yeah.
So, we just lost the race this time. That's
Yep.
all it was. I don't fault Dutton for his actions. Given similar circumstances, I think we'd both behave in the same way. Just to dump a citizen. Sorry.
Well, I mean, the
a
fact that
terrorist.
he's yet to be convicted of anything, and I guess that's probably, insofar as this should be a power that is available to the government, which, I'm not entirely convinced it should be. The fact is, he's yet to be convicted of anything. He's under arrest in Turkey for, he's been charged with terrorism offences, and obviously Australia's trying to extradite him. So the fact that they're trying to do this now is kind of like, oh, yeah, maybe after the fact it would be okay, but.
Yeah. So the thing is, he probably will get charged for it because he did that we did have that law to stop people from, basically taking arms against our troops in the region, which is so he wouldn't fall under the, a foreign fighter thing, but he did give aid and comfort to those fighting against Australian forces. So technically they would hit him up with a treason charge, whatever the equivalent of a treason charge is.
Yeah.
So look, to be perfectly honest,
Which would be weird if they stripped him of his citizenship, because, like, how can you charge somebody for treason if they're not a citizen anymore? But
well,
anyway.
yeah, but which I think would be.
I mean, the accusation is also that he was involved in plots here. The article I'm looking at says, he's wanted by Australian authorities over his alleged role in 2 terrorism plots, including one to target ANZAC Day services in Melbourne.
Yeah,
and then over his travel to Syria. So it's not just the fighting over there; it's stuff to do with here as well.
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, this is one of those situations where you just look at it and go like, I'm pretty sure this guy's guilty of shit. I'm pretty sure it's more than just him speaking against the Australian government.
Possibly. I just know that when it comes to any kind of national security, you really can't give the government too much of a benefit of the doubt. Like, I really think it's dangerous to always follow the government's line about these sorts of things. So, like, I'm not saying this guy's like pure as driven snow, but I'm always, given the amount of obscene power and given the amount of obscene power that the governments, including ours, but not exclusively ours, have to deal with people in this sort of realm and deal with them in a way that doesn't give them any rights and doesn't give them any due process, I'm skeptical of claims about people's mischief and misbehavior. So, anyway,
I'd be less skeptical. I'd be less skeptical if he hadn't flown to Syria, but sure.
Well, that I mean, I guess this gets into the question of, and maybe we could just sort of divert into it of, well, if he goes over there and he just, stacks shelves and does paperwork and, organizes the armory and, like does non-combat role related stuff, should he be found guilty of anything?
In that situation,
I mean, that's
giving aid, that's technically giving aid.
Yeah, giving aid and comfort. I mean, which is no different from, say, sending money from here to ISIS. I mean, is ISIS any less legitimate than Assad or the Iraqi government? Like, I mean, it's not like ISIS just sort of formed, like, came over from Mars and, it's completely alien to what's going on in the region. There's a reason ISIS rose. It's because those governments are corrupt or incompetent, and their citizens want something different and are willing to support ISIS, maybe as the lesser of evils, but still support. So, I mean, I guess the complexities, ISIS at least claims that they're trying to, fight over here as well.
I don't know. I can't get behind supporting them as even as a regional alternative to that, because they are. Look, there's a lot of arguments made. The lesser of two evils is probably better to support because it's the lesser of two evils. But I don't accept that in our political sphere. So why would I accept that in the Middle East's political sphere?
I mean, it's relevant in the sense that, should we be criminalizing supporting a local insurgency against corrupt governments? Like if Australians were involved in undermining the Saudi Arabian government, against North Korea? Like, if it was found that there was Australians smuggling goods into North Korea in order to undermine the regime, should they be charged with fighting a legitimate government?
So my objection to this comes from the fact that, look, there is an official. Whether I don't necessarily support the official Australian response to things, because we are a nation that gives an official response in the form of our military and in the form of our diplomatic arm.
Yeah.
Right? We have that system in place, and we have a system in place where we can control that, right? Like, we've got franchise for all Australians to have a say in how that voice gets broadcast to the world. Now, just because I disagree with that, I don't believe you should be allowed to. So I don't believe that there are no consequences for going out there and giving aid and comfort to people that are shooting at Australians. And
only because we're there, and maybe we shouldn't be there.
Like I said, I disagree with us being there.
Sure.
But disagree. Like I said, we have a process here that takes care of that. Lobby our government. Win that grassroots support to change that position. Taking up arms or giving aid to those those taking up arms against Australians, in my mind, is something you shouldn't do as an Australian.
So, I mean, we're really going to go into the weeds on this one from now on, because, at the moment. So, we would argue as libertarians that if you smuggle weed or, do any kind of, black market activity, that's not only a good thing, it's praiseworthy. We would say to some level, because
it's a victimless crime. It's not a victimless crime to take a shot.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like the Australian government isn't putting their finger on the scales of a political problem.
But it's
if the US came in and sent in the 101st Airborne to start bombing, polling booths in Melbourne because we want to get rid of the Greens, we would be like, no, you can't do that. It's not cool for foreign governments to come and start intervening in the domestic affairs of another.
And that's absolutely right. I do.
And if we shot back at the US, if Adam Bent was sitting there with his AK shooting at JSF fighters flying overhead, we'd be like, you go, Adam Bent, you do your thing.
That's all fine and well, right? Because you're defending your own, right? What I'm talking about is if an American came to Australia and picked up sides against the Americans doing that, right? I think the Americans would be right to prosecute that person as they come back to that country. because they have a process, just like we do, to decide that foreign and military, like our military power is under civilian control. Our foreign response is under civilian control. We may not all agree with the positions of our foreign and military positions,
Yep.
right, that are projected to the world, but we have a process here to do it non-violently.
Yep.
Right? So you shouldn't have to take up arms against another Australian. That's the entire point of our political system.
All right, I'll push back once more, and then we'll move on because we could probably talk about this like forever. So that argument though could be used against the weed dealer as well. You could say you shouldn't engage in black market activity. There is a process for which we deal with, making weed saleable. You should, instead of selling the weed to your friends, you should lobby Parliament to change the laws. And so therefore, by that argument that you're making, it's bad for them to sell weed because it's illegal. It's undermining the government. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You should go through the official process, which is.
You mean undermining the process? You mean not undermining the government? Undermining the government is fine. Undermining the process is what the problem is.
Sure. Okay, but nevertheless, by extending your argument from the foreign sphere to the domestic sphere, therefore, as libertarians, we shouldn't support the selling of weed.
So, if you actually take a look at it, there are a lot of libertarians that don't support the illegal sale of weed, right? But at the same time, they also say along the lines of, hey, but it's a victimless crime.
Okay.
And victimless crime shouldn't be law. Right? Well, as someone going and taking and picking up arms against an Australian soldier is not a victimless crime.
Yeah, but
that's a potential victim.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll leave it there because again, we could do this all night. And just as a final sort of closing statement, I don't think it's an irrelevant question because I think we would both agree that we need to be careful about what we tolerate overseas, our government doing overseas, because often that sort of stuff can be brought back into the domestic world.
And that's And to be fair, my argument is not a cop out that you should just let the politicians do whatever. It actually underlines how important that process is and how serious you should take it when politicians are saying we're going to send our troops out there, because you need to keep in mind that this is Australian blood that you're putting on the line. Right. And I think we are too flippant as a society on that point. Right. And to be fair, for me, right, as someone who works in Canberra and I see, the War Memorial every day, right, I sit there and I think, like, this is a great symbolic, there's so much symbolism put into that building, right? The parliamentarians, as they walk out of the House of Reps, can see the War Memorial, right? And that's meant to represent the human cost of those wars, right? But I suspect because they see it every day, it's kind of desensitized them. They now use it as a prop.
Yep.
Right? They use it as a prop. When they go like, we have to support our diggers that we've just sent to Iraq, our diggers that we've just sent to Afghanistan.
Yep.
And despite all this wonderful, symbolism and imagery that was put in by, Charles Bean, who put together the War Memorial, it's completely lost on us. And it's because, the people that make the same argument that I do flippantly use it as an argument to just support our troops, support the politicians.
Yeah.
And I think we do need to push back more on that as a society.
Well, let's talk about the grievance study scandal, hoax, however you want to call it. So essentially, this involves. I mean, you're probably better to explain this because I think you've had your finger on this pulse for a bit longer than I have. So
So I actually watched. I watched the interview that the three professors gave to Jordan Peterson, because I have a suspicion that it's just like everything else, right? Because right now, let's face it, the PC culture is a bit of the zeitgeist in the media, right? So if you're kind of running against it, it's really hard for you to get to get non-hostile interviews or even interviews at all in major media outlets. So like, for example, like Jordan Peterson, the only time he ever gets invited out to media events is when they're being incredibly hostile to him. Right. So these guys, or James Damore is another example. So when he tried to get out to media, the only times he got onto TV was when they were being incredibly hostile to him. And all he was doing was, pointing out, hey, people have preferences. So these guys basically, they had an underlying idea that that certain studies at universities are more grievance studies, or rather political. They're based in political activism and not any real sort of scholarship. And I think one of the articles they published was a literal republication of a passage from Mein Kampf, called "My Struggle," and it was about it was basically reframed as a third wave feminist issue. So when they finally came forward with the hoax, I believe a number of their articles were published in peer-reviewed journals.
Which I think we actually, now I recall, we definitely did talk about this on the podcast.
Yes.
So maybe I'll make sure I link to that episode if people want to sort of go over at the time what we said.
So what's happened since then is they've been referred to, because these are all hoax articles, right?
Yep.
So they've been referred to the the research board at their university.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have to seek approval for, like, there's an ethical there's an ethical duty that people have to do in researching at universities, and that was put into place because of a really famous study into fascism, which actually caused mental breakdowns in some people and stuff like that. So it was about, like, you have to create an ethical study and all these other things. So they've been referred to the board because these articles were obviously fake, right? And therefore, they should have their research credentials taken away from them. So effectively, it's like someone, it's like after being caught with your pants down, going, "Oh yeah, but you told a lie."
Yep.
Right. So it's rather interesting because it does look blatantly as retaliation. So my perspective on this was, like, I was looking at it going, like, this is pretty clear that it's retaliation, and I'm surprised that the university is entertaining it, right? Because it's pretty clear that they didn't fake the studies to fake the studies.
Yep.
They faked the studies to prove a point.
Yep.
And to be fair, the Sokal experiment is a really famous example of this. That was one of the biggest hoaxes that existed in the 1990s, and it was just there to prove a point that postmodern, journals don't really lack the editing rigor of a lot of other journals. And to be fair, I think they've taken Sokal and gone up to the next level. So I sit there and I go, like, we might actually have a real problem in some American universities, and I wonder if it's the same here in Australia, where there is a culture of retaliation when people question things, particularly in these grievance study subjects.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's my initial hunch. I mean, because obviously, the process of which this all happens is all behind scenes. Because whoever made the complaints, it's not like they're necessarily going to tell us who made the complaints or the nature of the complaints. So I actually almost see this much like when conservative web pages on Facebook get pulled down for no obvious reason, which is these processes kind of operate independently of common sense. Like, they just operate as a bureaucratic process. I mean, in the case of Facebook, it's algorithmic. In the case of in university, there's going to be some pencil head who gets the thing and ticks the boxes, and there's not really. I suspect there's in a lot of universities, there's not necessarily going to be a customer-driven feedback loop. That is, these universities are funded by government money. They don't have to produce an outcome for customers. They're theoretically accountable to politicians, like through the government's oversight of education.
Yeah.
But really, who wants to make a bet that actually happens? So
no, it actually does happen. So, like, if you take a look at ARC grants, right? When Gillard and co were in government, you can look at the statistics. The vast majority of that research money went into climate change.
Sure.
Right, and that's because that's what the government was interested in.
Sure.
They were looking for papers to support their climate change agenda.
Which is like the total opposite of what should be happening, which is, frank and fearless inquiry into ideas, without government interference. So, I mean, I think that sort of points to the nature of there should be oversight, But whether politicians actually give a crap is one question. But secondly, whether politicians are unbiased is a separate one.
Now here's the thing.
Which is just like, if I can just finish my point, it's just to say that just because these guys, these researchers, the people involved in the hoax are up on disciplinary charges, doesn't necessarily mean the system is malicious. It could just mean the system is stupid.
Yep. No, and I agree with you. I think that it is stupid. And like I said, my point wasn't that the system is broken.
Yep.
I said like someone who clearly knows the system is trying to use the system as a form of retaliation, right? Like
possibly.
Truth be told, let's be honest here. If someone comes up and says, my complaint is that these hoax articles were faked, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, yeah, they're hoax articles.
Yeah.
Right? That was the bloody point.
Sure. So I mean, but like retaliation implies malice. It implies that the system is fighting back, which if it was actually the case, I wouldn't be like, oh my goodness, how dare a university ever do that? Of course, like bureaucratic system that it's entrenched with privilege is going to fight back against any kind of threat to its, sort of its position. But just to say, in this instance, it may not actually be malice. It could just be some dickhead, has ticked the box saying, oh, yep, accept this complaint, and then there's a process. The counterpoint, I think, would be, well, yeah, but the university could stop this disciplinary process whenever they want. And they, I don't think, have you heard of they cancelled, are they still on the charges?
They're still going through.
Yeah, so, I mean, that would probably, that in my mind would be the counterpoint to what I'm saying, which is, well, if that truly was the case, when it came to light that some pencilhead had done this, well, the dean or whoever's in charge of the process would be like, yep, done, let's not do it. And that hasn't happened, and there's been a lot of coverage, and, a lot of people have come out in support of the authors of the paper, like, Richard Dawkins and Steven Pinker and Jordan Peterson, like, not exactly poorly known people in the academic world. Like, I think if those three come out in support of something, you would at least pay attention. Like, you may not agree, but like at least you're going to notice.
Well, I think I saw an article. I saw an article going like Nobel Prize winners are writing in support of them. And I went like, "Oh, fuck me."
Yeah.
You're fine. It's just like, I don't understand how you can still keep going through with this process.
Yeah.
When there are people like big names writing through, going like, "Yeah, stop this. It's stupid. It's looking stupid. It's making you look stupid." Right? And it's like, yeah, you guys got caught with your pants down. Just say that you're going to do better in future. Yeah. Right? Because that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Improve your processes.
Yeah. And I mean, in some ways, that's like the benefit of having an entrenched privileged position is like, you can just be like, yep, we screwed up. And guess what? It doesn't make any difference to what we're going to do. Like, I mean, that's what political parties do all the time. Like, like we've seen even with the national MPs have been literally caught with their pants down. It's not like, oh, the system is collapsing and the National Party, it's just they elect some other idiots and they move on. Like,
well, that's actually
because they're not accountable to the consumer. Like, there's no actual way they can go to business.
Exactly. And to be fair, I'm really enjoying the fact that all three of these so far, like, what is it, Little Proud? I can't remember the other guy's
Andrew
name.
Broad and
Joyce.
Joyce is cool.
Yeah.
I sometimes forget that he's still in Parliament like this.
Yeah, they're all still in Parliament, and they're probably still going to win at the next election.
Yeah.
Which I sit there and go like, I look at country Australia.
I'm pretty sure Andrew Broad's not going to run. I think he said he's not going to run for re-election though.
Oh, did he? Okay, so he's the only one who's got some integrity about him. But my point is, right? I sit there and look at this entire thing and go like, how much does someone have to shit on you before you decide not to vote for them, country Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying vote Labor, because Labor's going to shit on you too.
Yes.
I mean, they've openly said they're going to shit on you.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
yeah.
All of that aside, look, to be perfectly honest, I think you're right. It is a process thing.
Yep.
But I have a suspicion that it has been some dickhead.
Yep.
And I think it's... because like that's why I wanted to talk about the Wilfrid Laurier case as well. But then I realized Saudi Arabian woman's probably more important.
Yep.
But these things happening in our universities are happening far too often for it to be like one-off instances anymore. I think there need to be reviews into how these bureaucratic processes inside universities are actually working, right? And if they're actually see, the thing is, I think universities are doing really well with diversity of people,
Yep.
but I don't think they're doing well with diversity of opinion.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it would be difficult to argue against that one. I
Yeah.
mean, I think there's
And I have
I think some of this stuff can be overstated though. So like if you actually look at the number of incidences of, you know, like the Berkeley style cars being burned to the ground while they try to murder Charles Murray type stuff, there's very few instances, and like 95% of universities are just like doing their normal thing. And so
Yeah,
I
but
do wonder
I
like,
I think it's a higher number than before, though. I think the violence.
I mean,
streak
yeah,
has gone
that's
rising.
possible.
Yeah.
And in this instance, with the going after the authors of the article, I mean, is it a systemic issue? Maybe. It's hard to know.
Well, that's why I'm saying a review would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, in this case, like, I think it's, you know, with the US in particular, because you've got, well, and it's probably true of Australia as well, both state and federal funding. Like, you know, like, there's not one person holding the purse strings who can like call the shots, and that's going to make it difficult because then you've got conflicting levels of bureaucracy and politicians posturing and the rest of it. So, which again points to the fact that universities do have this entrenched position because there's very little accountability for what they do. So, I mean, really, in some ways, just you know, turning the funding situation into vouchers, or turning, you know, giving the money to students to spend as they see fit and allowing them to keep the difference, that would bring in prices and it'd bring in market forces that would probably curb some of this stuff. Maybe not all of it because, you know, shit happens.
Well, you know,
But
the funny thing is, a lot of countries that had free education models are actually going in the opposite direction now. So, like the UK has never had a free education model. They've always had a university pay system.
Yeah.
And that's always worked. The United States is the same way. Canada's the same way. It's really a Nordic sort of thing to give education to everyone for free.
yeah, I mean, like, to the US is the student loan system, which is just, you know, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of subsidies to universities from the federal government in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, I think states, from what I understanding of how funding works in the US, there is state funding, but like the federal government is kicking a lot of the cash.
Yeah.
Which is causing
That's the point. It's
causing a
subsidized loans.
range of problems, not just that universities are not accountable, but yeah. All right. Any final thoughts so we can wrap up?
Yeah, no. Look, I'm in favor of a review. I think there needs to be a bit of a review over that. Like you said, there's a bureaucratic issue there, but I think just something to look at the light. You know, just shine a quick light and kind of take a look at what the landscape looks like. That'd be good to do.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we've finished another episode for this week. I guess next week we'll talk about the maybe go into sort of the case of the Saudi woman who was just found refuge in Canada. Thanks everybody for joining us. Don't forget to share and subscribe and all the other good things. Leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll be back again next week.